Alright, so hey everyone, today I want to take a look at the dead zones for the Ascent. This is being demonstrated on Xbox Series X, but starting with the movement, we have a just short of 26% mostly square dead zone. There's a very tiny radial dead zone being implemented on top of a 25% axial dead zone. That 25% axial dead zone causes that much around each axis to be restricted. So if you move your stick anywhere within these blue regions, you'll move in one of four directions. So in this case, perfectly right, perfectly forward, and perfectly backward. And you only start seeing diagonal movement occur once you break into these green regions. And this may be a little more obvious than in other games because you can see this crosshair moves a little more dramatically than perhaps you could tell with the character animations. This threshold over here represents the evade threshold. So if I press the A button under this, nothing happens. But if I push it over this, you can roll. The aiming dead zone is exactly the same. So the same very slightly rounded inner dead zone. And the same level of restriction. This applies to both movement and aiming, but this restriction is not ideal because this makes it so that your stick movement is not accurate to where the character is moving or aiming. And you can see that I'm just moving the stick slowly in a circle, and you can very clearly see that it is locking within these axial dead zones. And for example, an issue is if you have an enemy, in this case, who isn't perfectly on the horizontal axis and perhaps is down here, you may move the stick to what should be the correct angle, but you can be restricted and end up shooting over them, or even if you're in a diagonal region, that's correct, since all your angles are scaled, you may still be over or under shooting your target. There is some generous auto aim options to counteract that, and of course you can disable those and just compensate this for yourself, but it is a little unintuitive to have your stick angles not being applied accurately to where you're aiming. I think what's interesting about this genre is I definitely haven't played an exhaustive amount of twin stick shooters, but the majority of the ones I've played do use radial dead zones with full diagonal movement. And I think a big part of the reason for that is just how easy it is to see this restriction like this and address it. I don't think that most axial dead zones are intentional choices. In this case, we might even blame the Unreal Engine for this. Unreal, at least Unreal Engine 4, defaulted to axial dead zones. And these tiny radial inner dead zones, inner dead zone, and this radial evade threshold may indicate that the developers had applied radial thresholds, but an underlying axial dead zone just made it through production. So perhaps, you know, the developers were doing everything to offer full diagonal movement, but just overlooked that underlying engine default. Something that may go against that, though, is the map cursor dead zone. This appears to be a 20% perfectly square dead zone. And as you can see on the graph, but probably can tell with the way the map is scrolling, that as soon as you exit out of the dead zone, you have full diagonal movement. So Moving just to the cardinal regions of the dead zone would limit you to 4 directions, but you can clearly see that there's more than that. And I can bob around the axis to further demonstrate that there is full diagonal movement being demonstrated here. This type of dead zone is pretty simplistic. All it's looking for is that either the horizontal and vertical axis is greater than the dead zone, and then once it does, it uses the original stick values. So in pretty much all the implementations I've seen, this is an unscaled dead zone. So once you exit this, you immediately start faster, like all the actual values in here are lost. So presumably once you exit the dead zone, you start at 20% of your total speed, but you maintain your full diagonal movement. This type of dead zone would have been perfectly fine for aiming because the dead zone size or the cropped acceleration don't matter at all. All that aiming is looking for is your angle, and this type of implementation would have preserved that. So that's a little unfortunate for this because this type of dead zone would work perfectly fine and even ideally for aiming, but it's relegated to controlling the map, which needs the least amount of precision. So whatever the reason, unfortunately the axial dead zones for movement and the normal camera aren't particularly ideal, even though the game is perfectly playable as is. But that about covers things. So thanks for watching, and everyone have a good rest of your day.